Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Sustainability Chats with Friends. I'm thrilled to be joined today by Bethany, who's working at the intersection of sustainability, circularity, and innovation in the apparel and textile industry. So, Bethany, before we dive in more, could you please take a minute to introduce yourself to everyone listening?
Yes, and thanks for having me on the podcast. My name's Bethany Meuleners, and I am the venture lead and head of product development at Variloom. I oversee and manage the venture and a team of experts that have a unique range of backgrounds in fashion, sustainability, and engineering, which helps us bring our business material and system to life. And I'm excited to share more about what we're doing at Variloom with you all.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm excited to hear more too. And what I really noticed when I was going through the website was the difference between, well, not necessarily the difference, but you address both sustainability and circularity. And I think that
Mhm,
those are two terms that are used interchangeably, but they are different. And so I thought it'd be
mhm.
a nice way to frame our conversation, just briefly touching on your definitions of sustainability and circularity.
I do think they are different definitions, but I think they go hand in hand. So for me, sustainability, like, and I'm going to speak in the context of designing and products because that's my
Mhm.
background, means designing and supporting products and the systems that make those products in a way that reduces environmental impact across the life cycle. And then circularity, I think, is an example of that, where you can reduce that impact by having those systems and better materials that are able to extend the life and return materials and products to a new life. So I think that they're separate but very closely related.
Yeah, I like how you say that. I view it in a similar way as well. I think circularity is a tool to achieve sustainability, and
Yeah,
sustainability kind of
exactly.
looks at balancing the planet, the people, and the profit. Um,
Yeah, yeah. And I think circularity makes it gives it a tangible way of achieving sustainability.
Totally, totally. And so you've been working in the apparel and textile design industry for over a decade. And so I'm
Mhm.
curious to hear how you kind of found yourself in that space and if you always knew that sustainability and circularity were an interest, or if you kind of had one of those moments that a lot of people do that made you realize that
Mhm.
that's the place where you want to be.
Yeah, so honestly, and fashion started really early for me. Since I was a little girl, I wanted to work in fashion. So I'm one of those people who can say I am doing what I set out to do as a child. So I was always super creative and expressive and genuinely fascinated by how things were made. So I took that and ended up studying fashion design in undergrad and then went on to grad school for it. And then my career really took off after grad school when I started working for a range of different companies from small startups to large. But I think the aha moment actually happened pretty early for me. When I was in college, actually, I did a study abroad in Peru that was focused around corporate responsibility and sustainability in business. And so it wasn't focused around fashion. We explored tourism, mining, other forms of production, but it really stuck with me and changed the way I looked at how I could apply that to what I'm doing. So it was already a lens for me by the time I entered the fashion industry. So I think that in a way, I feel lucky that it wasn't something that came later. It's something that's always been a part of how I think about fashion.
That's amazing. That sounds like an incredible experience. And
Yeah, it was really great actually.
yeah, Peru's like one of the top maybe two countries that I haven't been to yet that I've been really wanting to go to. So that's super cool. Did
I definitely recommend it. It's wonderful.
Okay, I'll let you know if I go and ask for a recommendation.
Great.
Did you help found Veriloom, or were you there at the beginning? Or how did you kind of then get involved with them?
So, Variloom is a venture that's a part of Moon Creative Lab, which started back in 2018. And one of the early ethos of Moon was to have big, bold ideas that could have an impact on the world. And one of those areas that they considered looking at was the textile industry because there's a lot of waste, there's a lot of inefficiencies in the supply chain. So the idea of Veriloom came to be with the idea of could you make clothes, could you print clothes, could you have them be made in shorter time closer to the consumer. So I was not there at the very beginning, but I've been with Variloom for several years now, and I was brought on as we started to transition from core R&D into scaling and commercialization and working with brands.
That's an exciting time to come on.
Yes, it's been a fun and wild ride.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Is there like something that makes you super excited to come to work?
I think that it's that we're working with really exciting brands that are not just open to sustainability, but open to new ways of making product,
Mm.
and being able to work with the decision makers and the designers at those brands is just like brings a lot of energy and really makes what we're doing super tangible. And so it really kind of connects my past in design and everything really like in a hands-on way.
Mm. Yeah. It's really interesting. I'm wondering two things, but I guess the first more pressing one would be, could you please explain the process? Like what makes Veriloom unique?
Yeah, I can do that. So back a little bit. The first when we started the venture started, the first kind of challenge that we recognized that we would need to kind of cross is having the right material in order to be able to 3D print textiles and soft goods and products. So early on in the venture, our biggest priority was let's create this material that can work for it. So the start of our process is in how we make our materials. So we have a patented way of how and patented way of how we make our filament, which is a 3D printing material that allows us to incorporate natural fibers, other natural additives, and is breathable, soft, and wearable. And we can also customize the formula. So that's one part of it without getting too technical of how filaments are made. That's the first part of the process. But then with 3D printing, it's made in a way that's different than other materials. Instead of weaving or knitting, it's layer by layer. And you can design it down to the fraction of a millimeter. So it really opens up a lot of opportunity for design in the textile, for functionality in the textile. And then as a system, we are developing machinery and parts and software that enable designs to go from digital design into actual textiles and products, which enable 3D printing to be brought into systems with brands in a seamless way and closer to the consumer. That's a very extensive view of what we're doing, but kind of the short of it is this all is lending to making an impact on the supply chain, because one of the biggest, I think, challenges with the fashion industry is the reliance on offshore manufacturing.
Mm.
And if you can do that in a tangible way where you can bring production closer to consumers, shorten lead times, and enable better response to consumer needs, that's kind of the ultimate goal of what we're building.
Right, yeah. So whereabouts are you based at the moment? Where's your key consumer base?
So we're based in Palo Alto,
Okay.
California. And obviously, we're in a huge tech hub of the world, which is great being a technology company. There's also a long history of fashion in San Francisco. But I think what's really great about what we're building is it doesn't really matter where we're located, since we're building something that's so modular and can connect with existing systems and existing locations for the brands and companies that we work with.
That's really cool. I love how systemic it is. Is your vision kind of to have these hubs all over the States or all over the world eventually?
Yeah, I mean, if you can imagine, like, if there's a future where, any product could be made anywhere at any time, and that could mean a number of things, from in-store customization. Imagine being able to walk into a store using the surfing that we talked about offline. As an example, if you're a big surfer, we've developed a board short with Rip Curl, being able to go into the store customize based off of your fit, your needs, and have your product made for you. I think that's kind of the most high touch for customers. But you could also have micro factories and manufacturing hubs. Imagine if a lot of these big supply chain people could have location based closer to their brands or their customers. So I think there's a lot of different ways you could look at it. And I don't think it's that far off to be able to have that level of localization in the future in the grand scheme of things. So
Right, that's good to hear. I think using Rip Curl actually would be such a good example because the second part of the question that I mentioned earlier was I was curious to know if you had a design guide, kind of like a low impact
mm-hmm,
design guide as a brand. And
mm-hmm,
so Rip Curl, the partnership that you partnered with Rip Curl and then you
yeah.
won the ISPO award, which is basically an award for outstanding products and materials in the outdoor sports
Mm-hmm,
industry. And so maybe we could use that product as an example if you have a design guide kind of what you were
yeah.
thinking as you went through it.
Yeah, and I can kind of touch on both parts about it. So we don't necessarily have strict rules, like design guides as we work on a number of different products, the board short being one of them. But I think the biggest thing is that all of these products require different strategies, different mindsets, and we have a general kind of mindset of being human centered and making sustainability be a part of the decision. So really looking at like what is the end wearer and user need, what does the product need, how can our technology and our solution support that, and working with the designers to really get to kind of that focus. And I think those constraints often help you and the designers and everybody to be more creative and lead to better solutions. So the example of that is the board chart, which I actually have here,
No
that I
way.
can show you. So this is the board chart. It's a little harder to see on camera. A lot of the details are actually on the inside of the product. But to explain a little bit about this process is that we sat down and we worked with Rip Curl's sustainability, innovation, and product teams. And it started from, what are the challenges that surfers have? And, one thing with board shorts, as you're surfing, and I wish I had this experience myself, but nobody wants to see me on a surfboard. I would not be the best example of that is that board shorts tend to ride up as you're wearing them, which can impede surfing and can be uncomfortable. So we started looking at ways that we could improve that without having to totally change the design of a board short because a board short is a board short. So you still want it to have kind of the look and feel of a board short. So we added grip with our 3D printing on the inside of the waistband. And with our layering, we're able to add targeted points where it can touch the skin more. And because our material is soft and flexible and it incorporates wool, it's actually comfortable grip. We also added that on the inside of the bottom of the board short. And then we added these side panels where we were able to design, it's a little hard to see, but design structure into it that allows water to flow through, but also adds weight to the side of the board short, which holds it down. And then we added internal structure. These front panels actually tighten and can cinch the board short while it's being worn. So instead of trying to just add 3D printing features to have 3D printing features, we really set out to make conscious decisions to improve the product.
That's amazing. And so I tried 3D printing when I was in college, and there are some quite obvious telltale signs that it's 3D printed. Like there are ridges usually, and like the base is usually like
Yeah.
skins. It's really hard. Like I've never seen such a soft material before. And it looks
Mm-hmm.
like from what I can see on the camera, it looks like it's smooth. Like it looks like a normal kind of fabric.
Yeah, and I actually have some other examples here that I can show. So this is one of our
Oh,
materials.
wow.
And you can see that it drapes, it's lightweight. We can do a number of different structures. So this is an example of printing and adding fringe.
Mm.
We can do more like lace structures. I don't know if you can really see.
Mhm.
We can add in drape and stretch.
Oh, wow.
through how it's made. So those are just examples of like what you're saying. It looks soft, it's draped, but I totally understand what you mean about what people expect from 3D printing. A lot of
Mm,
people's first experience or understanding of 3D printing is hard plastic objects
mm,
where you can see the layers and lines and ridges. And that's largely because 3D printing has generally been used for rigid structures using harder materials. And at Variloom, because we're working with a soft, flexible material that helps kind of eliminate the hard 3D printed look. And then, unless you want to have ridges or anything like that in design features, you really can create something that looks and feels like a textile. Like if you didn't know it was 3D printed, you wouldn't look at it and say this is 3D printed, which I think is really amazing.
it is. And is it printed flat or do you print it kind of vertically?
So currently we are printing flat.
Okay.
So we're printing on flat beds. We're able to build up layer by layer and we can do, different techniques and combine with other fabrics. And then we're able to print a range of sizes from, small products. This is a zipper pull that I can talk about a bit later to
Mm,
yardage of fabric. So we're in development of machinery that allows for us to do large yardage and panels of fabric, more maybe the traditional size you'd be thinking, which is not super common at the resolution of printing that we're doing. So really creating opportunities to cover a wide range of products.
mm. So are you eventually able to create rolls from it so people can use it for cutting
So
stuff?
it's not really necessarily rolls like you would think about in traditional fabric. Because if you think about why fabric comes in rolls, it's because they're making thousands and thousands of yards so that it can be laid out on tables and pieces are cut. And, that has worked for a long time because it supports, large quantities and everything like that. But it also supports overproduction of materials. It also supports the cutting waste in the textile industry. So really what our goal is not to provide rolls for cutting, is actually to print to shape for the product. So similar to knitting, instead of printing a large panel and then cutting pieces out. So to use the board short as an example,
Mhm.
those waistband pieces and the side panel are all printed to shape. So we're able to reduce waste. And it also reduces steps because then you don't have to lay it out on the cutting table. So there's a lot of improvements by being able to print to shape.
Yeah. And then how do you put it all together?
So there's a number of different ways. It depends on the product. The material can be sewn like traditional material. It can also be heat bonded depending on the materials it's being connected with. It can work with adhesives. Like it opens up a lot of opportunities that traditional textiles don't necessarily have because it does respond thermally to heat.
Okay.
So there's a range of ways that products can be constructed with it. And there's also ways of printing so the product itself is fully printed as well.
Right. I was wondering if that was possible, almost like 3D knitting, I guess.
Yeah, so it depends on the product and the size of the printing bed, but there's a lot of different technologies that are out there, utilizing robotic arms
Mhm.
or using kind of structures as support and things. So there's a range of different ways that there's potential to print one product all in one go.
Right. That's really cool. And how
Yeah.
did you do it for the board short? I mean, I'm loving the board short because I'm like the most novice surfer, but I feel like I can kind of understand the challenges that you spoke about. So I'm sort
Yeah.
of
So
intrigued by it.
you've been in the water, so
I
you
have
so you
been in the
understand
water.
it. We're relying on Rip Curl has a range of wear testers that
Oh,
wear
I
it
bet.
out
Yeah.
for like 300 hours. So they're out in the sun, out in the
Wow.
salt, out in the waves. So for theirs, it's a mix of this is mostly through heat and bonding
Okay.
and light adhesives, but we're still working with them for the final version or production. We're aiming to have it released later this year. But for them, we did print to shape, like I showed you. And then they're, they're incorporating it into kind of a core product of theirs, which I think is a really smart way to approach sustainability and circularity and not try to completely overhaul their whole system and like start building in with existing products, start making small changes with the types of materials and the processes that you use. So we're incorporating into an existing product with some of their, other sustainable materials in it, but trying to reduce the number of materials. So,
Okay, cool. Yeah, I feel like that makes sense. And also it must give you all over at Variloom the time and the chance to be able to test it out and see how it is working with that particular brand as well and seeing how you can
yeah,
scale at the same time.
exactly. And I think that, you know, change in the industry takes, you know, a collaboration of everyone. It's a very globalizing word, but it does a really collaborating with brands and finding the way that you can start to make those small changes with them.
Totally, 100%. I think collaboration is so key to it all. Collaboration and
Mhm.
community, because otherwise it just feels like you're doing everything by yourself.
Exactly. I mean, and you can make the most innovative supply chain tool or the most innovative material, but you need the brands to participate and work with you and use it. And then you need the customers to buy it and then everybody to work together for that end of life and circularity goals. It's kind of like raising children. It really does take a village.
Yeah, I was curious actually about your end of life because I read on your website that it can be recycled up to 3 times. And so I
Mhm.
was curious, are you able to recycle it only in-house? Can it be recycled in other facilities?
Yeah, so we're currently in the process of determining kind of the recycling at scale and where it can be recycled. So at this time, we're keeping it in-house to be able to manage and control the process. But we're very focused on this as we scale our production and our materials and our system. The end of life and the recycling part of it is just as important. And a lot of it comes with working with the brands as well for the reclaiming and all of that. So that's while we don't have all of the answers yet, it is one of the biggest focus points and challenges that we're working on as we scale our business.
That makes sense. How are you engaging with the brands at the moment? Is that kind of a factor that you have when you partner up with them? Would that kind of be a make or break? Like if the brand isn't able to take back the products, would you then not partner with them,
Um,
or are you finding that it's more straightforward?
no, I mean, I think that, like I said before, I think the change takes steps and takes collaboration. And part of it is meeting brands with where they're at, meeting consumers with where they're at, and building a system where this becomes possible
Mhm.
in the future. I think that, we all want this to be a 100% reality right now, but it's going to take some time. So I think working together to get to that. And ultimately, our material is recyclable, but we also continually work to increase our bio-based inputs and have, better and more responsible materials that go into it. And a lot of brands are very interested in that. And then there's also the reduction of impact through the process and supply chain itself.
Mm.
So I think that there is a core interest for improving all of these with brands, but the ability to recapture and recycle at scale, I wouldn't say is our number one decision maker with brands because if that was in place, I think it would be very difficult or if that was a rule for it would be very difficult to move forward and make actual change, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally does make sense. I think it's just top of my mind at the moment because the Patagonia impact report came
Mm-hmm.
out a few months ago and I was reading through it. And when I was reading it, it was kind of dawning on me that they didn't really have end of life in mind when they were designing a lot of their products. And so I was just, that's just why it was on the top of my mind.
Yeah.
I was
I
curious to get your
mean,
view on it.
I think there's a lot of different, part of sustainability and circularity is also the performance and functionality and durability of the product, which are just as important. You don't just want to have a product that can be managed at end of life. You want to have a product that can have an extension of life as well.
Mm.
So I think that there's that balance of performance and durability with end of life and sustainable and bio-based materials, and it all goes hand in hand, because the better you care for a product and the longer you can extend the life of it is also important. Because even if a product can be recycled or can be biodegraded, you don't want to be doing that 6 months after receiving it. You want to be able to love and live in and use the product for a long time. And I think that's something that Patagonia does really well, even if end of life isn't the number one thing that they're focused on.
Yeah, yeah, totally. That is very true. You mentioned about your supply chain and the sourcing in it. And I worked with the biomaterial textiles company a few years ago, and they found it really hard because obviously a lot of their process is proprietary. They have patents
Mm-hmm.
pending. They can't necessarily be that transparent about
Mm-hmm.
what they're using in their filament or whatever it was that they were using equivalent of. And so I was wondering how you're addressing traceability and transparency in your supply chain.
So a lot of it comes down to the raw materials that we choose. That's the first part of it. And the second part about it is the communication and the traceability. So for the raw materials that we're choosing, we are working with companies that have cradle to cradle certifications, have bio-based certifications. They have the certification. So even if we don't have them quite yet, which is on our list, we're going to be working for LCAs and all of, different certifications. So it's really important for us what materials we start from. So we're exploring recycled inputs, byproducts of the farming industry, all of that. So that's one part of it. And then for moving forward, as we scale, we want to do, or we will be doing life cycle assessments, some of our own certifications and all of that. But I think the most important thing, especially for early stage companies, whether you might not be able to share 100% of all of the details, but being honest with where you're at. Like, we may not be 100% bio-based, but we're working to increase it. And we're really working to balance the performance and the sustainability. And I think that honesty is probably the biggest. Honesty with as much information as can be shared that's not proprietary or not able to be put in the public is super important.
Yeah, totally. I completely agree. And I'm interested to hear that your life cycle assessment's underway, because that was one of the things that I was curious about knowing if you have the impact comparison between a
Yeah.
conventional
I mean,
fabric.
so we have not done it yet. We're in the process of scaling our material system, and have a pilot scale facility later this year. So once we have that up and running, we'll be able to do a more thorough life cycle assessment, because we don't necessarily have everything 100% set up to be able to do it yet. But that's a big part of the scaling, is us understanding what that actually looks like. And obviously there's different types of life cycle assessments, different companies, and I think they all rate things and do things a little bit different. But I think that it's all about, again, honesty and understanding where you're at, what can you do to improve it, and all of that.
Totally, totally. Yeah, it's a really interesting thing to have, assessment to have, even just for your own
Mhm.
knowledge, even if you didn't share it
Yeah.
publicly, it's interesting to see.
Yeah, I mean,
I love
it
it.
also it helps you understand, like I said, like improvements you can make, where things are working really well, where they may not be. I think there's a lot of great, not just for public consumption, but internal information that can help companies.
Yeah, totally, for sure. And you mentioned bio-based, and I was just wondering if anyone is listening and they don't necessarily know what bio-based means. Could you please just briefly?
Yeah, so I mean, there's different ways of making materials and plastics, all of, textile inputs. Some of them are man-made, some of them petrochemicals, some of them are natural. So there's a lot of work in the industry for having different feedstock or inputs to be able to replace traditional plastics. That could come from algae, it could come from corn, it could come from bacteria. But it's really working to increase the amount of inputs that can replace the man-made or chemical inputs. And again, like I mentioned earlier, it's a balance of the sustainability and performance and durability, because oftentimes the bio-based version is not as durable, does not last as long in the material. So there's different requirements in the US and the EU and different reporting standards for how much bio-based needs to be in a product to be considered bio-based. But yeah, I think I answered the question.
Yeah, you definitely did.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's always helpful. I've noticed as I do these talks more and more, I forget to ask people to define terms. And then I have
No.
people messaging me saying, what did you mean by this? Or what did the speaker mean by this? So when I remember, I
Yeah.
try to ask. But yeah, I'm curious to hear more about your performance because it sounds like it's something that's important to you. And is there a specific way that you measure it? And are you mainly focused on sportswear? Because that's what we've spoken about so far. But does your performance change based on the product category? And are you looking to move outside of sportswear as well?
Thank you for that question. It allows me to share a bit more about what we're doing. One thing that I really love about Variloom is that we can build in performance and customization at all levels. So we can customize the formula based off of the end needs of the product and depending on what materials we put into it. So we can have wicking, we can have odor control, we can have moisture management. There's a number of different things that we can do from the formula. We can also have different ranges of flexibility and softness. So with that, we're able to bake performance into the material as well as into the structure of how it's printed. And what that all does is it enables us to make a range of different products. So we're working in sports, we're working with luxury brands, we're working in accessories, other soft goods. Imagine being able to take an iconic pattern or design from a well-known brand and being able to customize it and bring it to life through 3D printing. We're also working with small accessories. We just recently had a collaboration with YKK, which is one of the most well-known or is the most well-known zipper and fastening company in the world, which we also won an ISPO award with them this year for best product and accessories. So you can imagine that's quite a range of different types of products. So the functionality and the performance is really product based. Like with the surfing, they're testing it in water, on surfers, in the sun. With the pullers, strength is really important. So there's a number of different, both chemical and mechanical tests that you can do in the industry. And depending on the brand, the product, the end use, everybody has slightly different standards. And for us, we work with brands and companies to understand what those standards are, and then we can pick the right version of our material and develop the right printing structure and format of how it's made. So yeah, I think I answered all parts of what you asked.
Yeah, that's
So,
amazing. I'm
yeah.
thinking like, what can you not do? Like, it sounds like there's so many things that you can
I would
create.
love to say that we could do anything, but that there are limitations just as there are with anything. But I really am excited about the fact that we can cover such a range of products, and I think that I'm sure a range of things that we haven't even thought of yet, because a lot of what comes out is in the collaboration process of working with the designers, working with the brands that makes the product and the textile and the idea come to life.
Yeah. Is there an upcoming collaboration that you're allowed to talk about that you're particularly excited about?
So I we're talking to a couple of luxury brands that I'm excited about that I'm not able to share at this time. I think the biggest ones that I am allowed to share at this time that are public right now are the Rip Curl and the YKK. You know, the YKK one is the newest, the one that just came out. And I think what's really exciting there is, you know, YKK is one of the most well-known zipper companies on the planet. You can imagine how many product zippers are on. So to borrow a little bit from their tagline, which I'm not speaking for them at all, their tagline is little parts, big difference. So you can imagine like it might be something small, but it shows up in so many places. And I think that it really gives us an opportunity to 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 look at scale, to look at like the broader industry. So I think that while it's a small part, like I showed you, it's just exciting for kind of that outlook and that opportunity.
Totally, totally. And are you mainly focused then on working with bigger brands, or would you also consider like one-off partnerships with, I don't know, like emerging designers or smaller companies?
I mean, we're working with a range of different sizes. Obviously, the two that I've listed are larger brands. With 3D printing, it allows for lower minimums, shorter lead times. And so there's a lot more flexibility. Like, I think one of the biggest barriers for smaller brands is being able to utilize new materials and tech because the barrier to entry with the high minimums and high quantities really blocks a lot of brands and designers. And I think that 3D printing and other additive manufacturing and other like new innovations can almost in a way democratize opportunity a bit more. So we are talking to a range of different sizes.
Awesome. I love that. It's like giving the power back to everyone who wants to be involved.
Yeah, exactly.
That is great. I guess kind of speaking back to your design roots, is there something, if someone's listening now who wants to get into sustainability or circularity, is there a skill that you think a designer needs now that maybe wasn't so needed before, or something that stands out to you in your practice?
Yeah, I mean, I think that generally the concept of designing for circularity is super important. It shouldn't be an afterthought. It needs to be a part of the design process, the consideration of the materials, how it's made, reducing the number of processes. So I think that just kind of as a concept is super important. And then I think the second big idea that is important for new designers is understanding tech. There's so many new textile and supply chain and innovations and advancements and digital tools that are changing every day and changing the way fashion is made. And I think I've done some teaching at fashion schools, and I think it is starting to be incorporated into schooling, but and education tends to lag back a little bit. So I think for designers to be curious and really looking for what's going on in the industry and keeping both tech and circularity in mind, I think will be important and required. I mean, if you look at the EU and all the requirements that are coming out, it won't just be the sustainability teams that have to understand it and that are impacted by it. The designers will be as well.
Right, yeah. I think that's great advice. And would you have similar or differing advice for brands as well who want to be more circular?
Yeah, I think that understanding what's out there, and I think I touched on it a little bit earlier, is that I would say it's next to impossible to make a systemic change overnight. So understanding the step-by-step process and where you can make change. It could start with replacing, you know, a material in your core product that is more sustainable, or it could be the way you're making things. And I think that if people can approach it as a process and not a kind of overnight change, I think it makes it more accessible, more approachable, and easier to implement.
I love that. That's such a good note to end on, I think. Like, thank you so much for sharing everything. I think it's been
Yeah,
such an inspiring and insightful conversation. And I guess
thank you for
just
having me.
to, yeah, of course. Just to round us off and close us out, I ask everyone, what's your one curiosity that you'd like the listeners to look more into or to explore?
Yeah, I love this question. I'm gonna go with a book that I've both read and listened to on tape several times because I find it so interesting. There's a book called The Secret Lives of Color,
Mm.
and I just think it's a really fun, interesting read because it goes beyond just like here's descriptions of colors. It goes into the social and historical stories behind how colors came to be, how they're made, what the formulas are, how they impacted trade, how cultures and industries were shaped by them. And I just think that it changes the way you look and think about color, which is such an integral part of not just fashion, but our everyday lives and really understand more about it. So it's one of my favorite kind of nonfiction informative books that I think more people should know about.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think I would love that.
Yeah,
I haven't heard of it before.
yeah, it's great. Highly recommend it.
Amazing. Oh, well, thank you again so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Thank you so much for having me, and I really enjoyed the conversation.
Oh, I'm glad, me too.